She'll panic when she sees the account is empty. My daughter's voice stopped me cold. I stood just inside the front door, one hand still wrapped around the brass handle, listening to Lauren speak from the living room. I had only returned from my morning walk a few seconds earlier. She clearly hadn't heard me come home. At 65, I had learned not to react before understanding what was happening, so I remained silent. Lauren laughed softly. "Michael and I already have everything planned," she said. "I logged into Mom's account yesterday. The transfer is scheduled for 9 tomorrow morning, $200,000. Once it reaches our joint account, we can finally close on that townhouse." My stomach tightened. $200,000. My savings. The money my late husband Richard and I had spent 40 years building. Lauren continued as though she were discussing an ordinary shopping trip. "She doesn't need that much anymore. What is she going to spend it on? She's 65. She should be thinking about relaxing, not hoarding money in a bank." Michael chuckled. I closed my eyes for 1 second. 6 months earlier, I had added Lauren to my savings account. She had insisted it was for my protection. "If anything happens to you, Mom, I need access," she had said. "What if you're sick? What if the bank needs someone else to handle things?" I had believed her. I had trusted my only daughter. Now I understood exactly what that trust had been worth to her. I quietly stepped back outside and pulled the door shut. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't confront them. I walked to my car. My hands were steady as I started the engine. The clock on my dashboard read 10:02 a.m. I had less than 23 hours before Lauren's planned transfer, and suddenly, every uncomfortable moment from the past 10 months made sense. After Richard died, the house had become painfully quiet. It was a large 4-bedroom home filled with memories of our marriage and decades of family life. Then Lauren and Michael had asked to move in temporarily. "We just need a few months to save for our own place," Lauren had promised. I welcomed them. I thought having family around would make the house feel alive again. Instead, within weeks, I became their unpaid housekeeper. Lauren left dishes everywhere. Michael complained about the internet. They took over the television, the garage, and nearly every room downstairs. Whenever I asked them to contribute, Lauren would sigh. "Mom, we're trying to build our future. You have plenty of space. Why are you making everything difficult?" I had swallowed my frustration. I had told myself they were family. But now, driving toward my bank, I finally saw the truth. They weren't building their future. They were planning it with my money. I pulled into the bank parking lot and turned off the engine. For a moment, I sat there quietly. Then I picked up my purse. I wasn't going inside to beg for help. I wasn't going inside to complain about my daughter. I was going inside to take back control. I walked through the glass doors and approached the branch manager, a man I had known for years. "I need to make some immediate changes to my accounts," I said. He looked at my face, then at the identification I placed on his desk. "Of course, Mrs. Carter." I took a slow breath. "First, I need you to stop a scheduled transfer." His expression became serious. "Which transfer?" "The $200,000 transfer scheduled for tomorrow morning." And for the first time that morning, I felt something other than betrayal. I felt powerful. The trap Lauren had carefully prepared for me was about to disappear. The branch manager studied the screen for several seconds before looking back at me. "Yes," he said quietly. "There is a transfer scheduled for tomorrow morning." "I want it canceled," he nodded. "And I want to make another change." I leaned forward. "Remove all access to my primary savings account. I want a completely new account in my name only. New account number, new online credentials, new security questions, everything." The manager didn't ask unnecessary questions. He simply began processing my instructions. Within minutes, the scheduled transfer was canceled. The $200,000 Lauren had already mentally spent was still mine. But I wasn't finished. I wanted every dollar protected. The manager helped me move the funds into the new individual account. I carefully reviewed every document before signing it. I also requested additional verification requirements so nobody could access the account simply because they knew personal information about me. When everything was completed, the old account contained exactly $10. $10. That was all Lauren would find. I walked out of the bank carrying a new debit card and a folder containing my updated account information. The sunlight outside seemed brighter than before. My money was safe. But my home wasn't. I drove directly to a hardware store. For 10 months, Lauren and Michael had treated my house like a free hotel. They had used my kitchen, my utilities, my internet, my garage, and my patience. I had allowed it because I believed they needed help. Now I realized they had mistaken my kindness for weakness. I bought heavy-duty storage bags, packing boxes, tape, and a permanent marker. Then I drove home. Fortunately, both Lauren and Michael were still at work. The house was silent when I entered. I walked upstairs to the bedroom they had taken over. The sight almost made me laugh. Clothes covered the chair. Shoes were scattered across the floor. Empty coffee cups sat beside the bed. Michael's gaming equipment was spread across a desk. Lauren's makeup covered half the bathroom counter. It looked less like a guest room and more like someone had claimed permanent ownership. I didn't throw anything away. I didn't destroy anything. I simply packed. One item at a time. Shirts went into bags. Shoes went into another. Books, jackets, electronics, and personal belongings were carefully boxed. I separated their passports and important documents and placed them in a clearly labeled box. I wanted no excuse for them to accuse me of damaging or stealing anything. For nearly 3 hours, I worked. By the time I finished, 15 large bags and several boxes were lined up neatly near the front entrance. I looked around the empty bedroom. For the first time in months, it felt like my house again. But there was one more problem. Their keys. I called a locksmith. 30 minutes later, a technician arrived and replaced the locks on the front door, back entrance, and garage. As he worked, I sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee. Every turn of the screwdriver felt like another piece of my independence returning. When he finished, he handed me a new set of keys. I locked the front door. The deadbolt clicked firmly into place. I tested it twice. Perfect. At 4:30 p.m., I sat in my favorite chair and looked around my living room. The house was quiet, peaceful. Mine. I picked up my phone and sent one message to Lauren and Michael. Come straight home after work. We need to talk. Nothing more. No explanation. No argument. I placed the phone face down. I knew they would soon discover the empty bank account, and when they did, they would come home expecting the mother they had always controlled. But that mother was gone. At 5:17, my phone began ringing. Lauren. I let it ring. It stopped, then started again. A moment later, messages appeared. Mom, what's happening? Why can't I access the account? Did you go to the bank? Please answer me. I read every message without replying. I didn't need to explain myself through a phone screen. I wanted them to come home. I wanted to see the moment when Lauren finally understood something she should have understood years ago. Being someone's daughter does not give you ownership of their life. I stood and walked toward the front window. Outside, 15 black bags waited on the porch. And soon, so would Lauren and Michael. At 5:28 p.m., headlights swept across the living room wall. I knew immediately who it was. Michael's SUV came around the corner too quickly and stopped hard in the driveway. The passenger door opened before the engine had completely shut off. Lauren jumped out. Her phone was still in her hand. Michael followed close behind her. Neither of them looked calm. They had discovered the money. And now they were coming home to demand answers. I stood behind the front door and watched them approach. Lauren climbed the porch steps, staring at her phone. Then she noticed the bags. She stopped. For several seconds, she simply stared. 15 large black bags were arranged neatly beneath the porch awning. Michael nearly walked into her. "What is all this?" he asked. Lauren didn't answer. She stepped toward the door and pulled out her key. She inserted it into the lock. Nothing happened. She tried again. Still nothing. Her expression changed. "Mom!" Her fist struck the door. "Mom, open the door!" I slowly unlocked the front door. But I didn't open the inner door completely. Instead, I left the security screen locked between us. Lauren stared at me through the mesh. "What did you do?" Her voice was already rising. I looked at her calmly. "What do you mean?" "The bank account," she shouted. "It's empty. My access is gone. What happened to the money?" Michael stepped closer. "Brenda, you need to call the bank. Something has clearly gone wrong." I almost smiled at the absurdity. They were standing outside my house, demanding that I recover money they had planned to steal. I folded my arms. "The money is fine." Lauren's face tightened. "Then where is it?" "Exactly where it belongs." She stared at me. "In my new account." Her mouth fell open. I continued. "An account you cannot access." Lauren looked at Michael. He looked back at her. Neither had an answer. Then Lauren whispered, "You knew." "Yes." "You heard us?" "I heard everything." Her face drained of color. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. "You were never supposed to hear that conversation," she whispered. "I wasn't supposed to know what you were planning either." Michael stepped forward. "You're misunderstanding this." "No," I said. "I'm finally understanding it." I pointed toward the bags. "And that's why your belongings are outside." Lauren turned around. "You packed our things?" "Yes." "You can't do that." I looked directly into her eyes. "This is my house. We live here." "You lived here because I allowed you to." Her expression twisted with anger. "We're family." Family doesn't schedule a $200,000 transfer from someone else's savings account. Silence. Lauren's eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I was stressed. Michael and I were desperate. I didn't actually mean to hurt you. You were going to take my savings. I was going to borrow it. You didn't ask." She had no answer. Michael tried another approach. "Look, everyone is emotional right now. Just let us come inside. We can sit down and discuss this." "There is nothing left to discuss." He frowned. "You're seriously throwing us out? You're adults with jobs and vehicles. You can find somewhere else to live." Lauren began crying. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That isn't my responsibility anymore." She stared at me as if I had become a stranger. Maybe I had. Or maybe she was finally seeing me clearly for the first time. She had spent 10 months believing I was too lonely to say no. She had mistaken my kindness for dependence. She had assumed that because I loved her, I would tolerate anything. She was wrong. "Mom, please," she said softly. "I'm your daughter." I felt the words hit me. Of course she was my daughter. That was precisely why the betrayal hurt so deeply. But being her mother didn't mean surrendering my financial security. It didn't mean allowing her to control my home. And it certainly didn't mean accepting theft as the price of love. I looked at the bags. "Your passports and important documents are in the box on top." Lauren wiped her eyes. "You really want us gone?" "Yes." Michael's expression hardened. You'll regret this. I didn't respond. I simply reached for the door. Lauren stepped closer. Mom, wait. I paused. She looked at me through the screen. I love you. For a second, I almost broke. Then I remembered her voice that morning. She'll panic when she sees the account is empty. I took a breath. I loved you enough to trust you. Then I closed the door. The deadbolt clicked. On the other side, Lauren began crying. Michael started arguing, but I walked away. For the first time in 10 months, I wasn't listening to them. I was listening to myself. For nearly 20 minutes, I could hear them outside. Lauren cried. Michael complained. At one point, he pounded on the door and demanded that I come back outside. I didn't. I remained in the kitchen, making myself another cup of coffee. I could hear bags scraping across the porch. Then came the sound of a car trunk opening. One bag after another was loaded into the SUV. Eventually, the voices became quieter. Then I heard the engine start. I stood near the kitchen window, but didn't look outside. The vehicle backed out of the driveway. A few seconds later, the street became silent. I was alone. But strangely, I didn't feel lonely. I felt relieved. For months, I had been afraid of that silence. After Richard died, an empty house had seemed unbearable. That was why I had welcomed Lauren and Michael. I thought their presence would fill the space he had left behind. Instead, they had filled it with tension. Now the silence felt different. It wasn't emptiness, it was peace. I walked upstairs. The guest room was completely empty. I stood in the doorway and looked around. There were no clothes on the chair, no shoes on the floor, no gaming equipment humming in the corner, no makeup covering the bathroom counter. Nothing. I opened the windows. Fresh evening air entered the room. For the first time in months, I could breathe. That night, I slept better than I had in nearly a year. The next morning, I woke naturally. No loud television, no arguments, no footsteps downstairs, no one demanding breakfast. I made coffee, opened the curtains, and stood in the sunlight. I realized something important. I had spent so much time worrying about being a good mother that I had forgotten I was also allowed to be a person. I had worked for decades. I had built a home. I had saved for retirement. I had earned the right to feel secure. None of that made me selfish. My daughter disagreed. For the next several days, Lauren tried everything. First came the messages. Mom, please answer. Then, I know I made a mistake. Then, Michael was the one who suggested the transfer. I didn't respond. The blame shifted quickly. According to Lauren, Michael had convinced her. According to Michael, Lauren had misunderstood the conversation, but I didn't care who had come up with the idea. Both of them had known about it. Both had expected to benefit. Both had treated my savings as though it belonged to them. A week later, Lauren left a voicemail. Her voice was trembling. I miss you, Mom. I know you're angry, but I'm still your daughter. Please don't let one mistake destroy our family. I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. It wasn't one mistake. It was 10 months of entitlement, followed by a deliberate attempt to take my financial security. That distinction mattered. I didn't hate Lauren. That surprised me. I simply stopped making excuses for her. There is a difference between anger and clarity. Anger burns hot. Clarity stays. And I had become very clear. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life fighting with my daughter. I wasn't going to argue over every accusation. I wasn't going to explain my bank account. I wasn't going to justify owning my own home. I simply established a boundary. And I kept it. 2 weeks later, I changed the guest room. I painted the walls a soft blue. I bought a comfortable reading chair. I added a small bookshelf near the window. I placed Richard's old wooden desk against the wall and filled it with photographs from our travels. The room no longer felt like a place someone had occupied without permission. It felt like mine. I also started doing things I had postponed for years. I joined a local gardening club. I began taking long morning walks again. I started having coffee with neighbors. And then, one afternoon, I opened my laptop and searched for something I had dreamed about for nearly a decade. Italy. Richard and I had always talked about going. We had planned to do it after retirement. But life kept creating reasons to wait. After he died, I couldn't imagine traveling alone. Now I realize something. Waiting for someone else to join me was another way of putting my life on hold. So I booked the trip. When the confirmation appeared on my screen, I smiled. I wasn't running away. I was moving forward. That evening, I stood on my porch watching the sunset. The house behind me was quiet. The locks were secure. My savings were protected. And my future belonged to me again. I had lost the illusion that family would always protect me. But I had gained something more valuable. I had learned how to protect myself. 3 weeks after Lauren left, I received a letter. I recognized her handwriting immediately. For several minutes, I left the envelope unopened on the kitchen counter. Part of me wanted to know what she had written. Another part of me was afraid that opening it would pull me back into the same cycle of guilt and forgiveness. Eventually, I opened it. Lauren apologized. She admitted she had been wrong. She said she had convinced herself that because I was financially comfortable, taking the money wouldn't really hurt me. That sentence stayed with me. Taking the money wouldn't hurt me. She hadn't thought about the years Richard and I had spent working. She hadn't thought about medical emergencies, retirement, repairs, or unexpected expenses. She had only thought about what the money could buy for her. A house, a bigger life, a shortcut. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "I hope someday you can forgive me." I folded the paper. I did forgive her. But forgiveness didn't mean giving her access again. That was something I had finally learned. You can forgive someone without inviting them back into your life. You can love someone without trusting them. And you can miss someone without reopening a door they repeatedly tried to walk through without permission. Lauren continued reaching out. Some messages were apologetic. Others were emotional. A few were angry. Then she began sending photographs of old family memories. My little girl on her first day of school. Lauren and Richard at the beach. Christmas mornings. Birthdays. She was reminding me of everything we had once been. For a moment, those photographs hurt. But they also reminded me of something else. I had been a loving mother. I had done my part. I had supported Lauren through childhood, college, difficult relationships, and adulthood. I didn't owe her my financial security as proof of that love. One Saturday morning, I received another message. "Mom, can we meet somewhere? Just for coffee?" I stared at the screen. This time I didn't immediately delete it. I thought about it for a long while. Eventually I replied, "One coffee, public place, 1 hour." That afternoon I met her at a small cafe downtown. Lauren looked different. She seemed tired. For the first few minutes neither of us spoke. Then she looked at me. "I really messed up." "Yes," I said. She lowered her eyes. "I don't know why I thought you would just give me the money." "You didn't think I would give it to you." She looked confused. "You thought you could take it." Her eyes filled with tears. "I know." I took a slow sip of coffee. "I need you to understand something, Lauren. The money was never the biggest betrayal." She looked at me. "The biggest betrayal was realizing you were comfortable planning my future without asking whether I wanted that future. She nodded slowly. I understand. I hope you do. She apologized again. This time, I believed she was genuinely sorry, but I still didn't restore her access to my finances. I also didn't invite her back into my house. Those boundaries stayed. We talked for almost an hour. When we stood to leave, Lauren hugged me. I hesitated before returning the hug. It wasn't the same as before. There was love there, but there was also caution. And I was okay with that. Healing doesn't always mean returning to the way things were. Sometimes healing means creating something healthier than what existed before. When I drove home, I felt lighter. I had expected guilt. Instead, I felt peace. Over the following months, I rebuilt my routine. My garden became the best it had ever looked. I filled the backyard with roses, herbs, and small vegetable beds. I traveled. I joined friends for weekend dinners. I read books in the room I had redesigned. And I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. My life no longer revolved around whether Lauren was happy with me. That was freedom. One evening, I sat at Richard's old desk and looked through our photographs. I found one from the first year we owned the house. We were standing on the front porch, younger and smiling. Richard had one arm around me. Behind us was the same house, the same porch, the same oak trees. I smiled. We had built that life together. And now, decades later, I was finally understanding that protecting what we built wasn't selfish, it was responsible. I had spent years believing that being a good mother meant giving until nothing remained. Now I knew better. Love should never require self-destruction. Family should never mean surrender, and kindness should never be confused with permission. That evening, I closed the album and walked outside. The sunset painted the sky above the trees. For the first time in a very long time, I felt completely at peace with the woman I had become. I wasn't the mother who had been abandoned. I wasn't the widow who lived alone. I wasn't the woman whose daughter tried to steal her savings. I was simply Evelyn Carter, 65 years old, still standing, still growing, and finally living my own life. 6 months after that morning, I stood in my kitchen with a cup of coffee in my hands and looked around my home. It was quiet, but this time, quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. The house was exactly the way I wanted it. The guest room had become my reading room. The kitchen stayed clean. The television wasn't blasting all day. No one complained about the internet. No one expected me to cook, clean, or pay their bills. And most importantly, no one had access to the money Richard and I had spent our entire lives protecting. My finances were secure, my home was secure, but the biggest change wasn't financial, it was inside me. Before Lauren's betrayal, I had believed that saying no to family made me a bad mother. Now I understood that sometimes saying no is the most responsible thing a person can do. Lauren and I slowly rebuilt a relationship. It wasn't perfect. There were still uncomfortable conversations. There were still moments when I remembered her voice from that morning. But things were different. She no longer assumed she had access to everything I owned. She asked before visiting. She respected my boundaries, and she understood that rebuilding trust would take time. Michael never apologized in person. Eventually, Lauren told me they had rented a small apartment. They were saving again. Without my money, without my house, without shortcuts. That was their responsibility. And strangely enough, I was glad. Because sometimes the consequence of a bad decision isn't punishment. It's finally having to become responsible for your own life. A few weeks later, I boarded a plane to Italy. I stood at the airport gate with one suitcase beside me and my passport in my hand. For years, I had imagined taking that trip with Richard. But standing there alone didn't feel sad. I felt excited. I walked through Rome. I sat in small cafes. I wandered through old streets. I took photographs of everything. One afternoon, I sat outside a little restaurant and watched people passing by. I thought about the woman I had been a year earlier. She had been afraid of being alone. She had allowed family members to cross boundaries because she feared losing them. She had confused sacrifice with love. I wasn't that woman anymore. I had learned that loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness is feeling unwanted. Solitude is choosing your own company. And for the first time, I enjoyed mine. When I returned home, I found a small package waiting on my doorstep. It was from Lauren. Inside was a framed photograph. It was an old picture of Richard, Lauren, and me. On the back, Lauren had written, "I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm grateful you're still my mom." I held the photograph for a long time, then I placed it on the bookshelf, not in the center, not hidden away, just where it belonged, part of my life. But not all of it. That distinction mattered. I eventually called Lauren. We talked for almost an hour. There was no shouting, no accusations, no discussion about money, just two people trying to figure out how to move forward. Before hanging up, she said, "Mom, I'm proud of you." I smiled. "I hope you're proud of yourself someday too." After the call ended, I stepped onto the porch. The oak trees moved gently in the evening breeze. I looked at the front door, the same door Lauren had pounded on that afternoon, the same door behind which I had finally chosen myself. I thought about how close I had come to losing everything because I trusted someone simply because she was my daughter. But I also realized something important. The story wasn't really about $200,000. It was about boundaries. It was about recognizing when kindness had become exploitation. It was about understanding that age doesn't make you powerless. And it was about remembering that your life remains yours, even when the people closest to you try to take control of it. I had spent decades building security for my family. After Richard died, I thought protecting that security meant keeping everyone close. I now understood the opposite. Sometimes protecting your future means letting people go. I didn't regret loving Lauren. I didn't regret helping her. I regretted only ignoring the warning signs for too long. If I could give one piece of advice to someone standing where I once stood, it would be this. Never confuse unconditional love with unconditional access. You can love your children without giving them control of your finances. You can help family without allowing them to disrespect your home. You can forgive someone without trusting them immediately. And you can walk away from toxic behavior without becoming a cruel person. Most importantly, you are allowed to choose peace. At 65, I finally understood that my life wasn't ending. It was opening. I had survived grief. I had survived betrayal. I had survived the moment when the person I trusted most revealed what she was willing to do for money. And I had come out stronger. My savings were safe. My home was mine. My future was waiting. I looked toward the garden and smiled. There was still so much I wanted to see, so much I wanted to learn, so much life left to live. And this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission. I picked up my coffee and walked into the house. Then I closed the door behind me. Not because I was afraid of what was outside, because I finally understood something I should have known all along. My peace was never something anyone else had the right to take, and protecting it wasn't selfish. It was the greatest gift I could finally give myself.